Oh, sorry. Yeah. Wait, shit. I forgot. I forgot. Literally, I forgot. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with Web 2 with today's SIGPwny meeting. Yeah, sure. Let's do a mic. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'll be presenting Web 2, Web Hacking 2, after which Cameron will step up and do a demo. So before we get started, some quick announcements. We are doing Seesaw CTF quals tomorrow. At what time, Cameron?
Seesaw starts at 7.
Okay, so Seesaw starts at 7, and there will be free food. So if you're free around 10, maybe we can hang out. And if there are more beginner-friendly challenges, you guys can feel free to attempt them, and we can provide some guidance along the way. Also, don't forget to register for Fall CTF 2025. It's an intro hacking competition run by yours only, SIGPwny, happening 21st September. And visit that website to register to get a free shirt and badge. Is that what we're doing? Yeah, usually. So those are the big events that are happening. And a quick shout out to our internal SIGPwny CTF scoreboard. Currently, SHCL is in the lead, followed by these people. So, you know, if you want to get on scoreboard and try our challenges and feel proud that you are #1 in the UIUC internal CTF scoreboard, you know, check them out. They're also great learning resources that will actually help you to practice and get up to speed. And this is our meeting flag. Did you set the meeting flag? Okay. Feel free to try the meeting flag. If it doesn't work, then we'll fix it afterwards. Don't worry about it too much. And this is also a classic XKCD comic that basically describes a classic SQL injection. Right? You name something that is kind of looking like a SQL query, and then bad things happen. We'll get into that later. And this is a classic cross-site scripting payload, which we'll also get into later. Okay, I'm gonna move on, but if you guys want to finish it, it's always at the end of the presentation, and you can check out the meeting PDF, the slides PDFs in our website. So we're gonna talk about two big topics. They're classic. So we're gonna talk about SQL injection and cross-site scripting. These are two classic web vulnerabilities that arguably, you know, their popularity fell off a little bit, but they're still really relevant, and it's a very good, you know, basically beginners kind of have to learn them before moving on to more advanced topics. So SQL injection is basically essentially a data confusion. You're confusing data with SQL commands, which means malicious user input can change what the original SQL statement is. So in case you guys don't know what SQL is, it stands for Structured Query Language. It's basically a way for you to index into a database and fetch the information that you need. It is pretty powerful, right? You can select these columns, first name, age. You can select these columns in database from this table. Where is basically the conditional in this statement, right? So you can have multiple databases, each one can have multiple tables. So for example, here the table is customers, and each one can have multiple columns and rows. So think about this as an Excel spreadsheet. Arguably, that's more popular than databases, but anyway. Think about this as an Excel spreadsheet. You have the bottom row, essentially, different tables, right? And you have rows and columns in each table. That's what we're doing here. So this is usually a primary key, which is unique in this column, and that's used to index the data. And basically, this is how SQL works in a nutshell. And so that one is select, which is basically you are using it to retrieve things. You can also use different queries to insert, right? So this is a way to add data into aforementioned table. Like you can see we added a row bottom. Now, essentially, database is at the back end of your website. So your client makes a request to your web server, for example, Python Flask, for example, um, Apache HTTPD, something like that, or PHP or something like that, right? And those backend languages essentially receive your request and put in a database request to retrieve relevant information. So for example, in a login flow, you would submit your username and password to a server. Now, in a classic setup, you might have PHP on the back end, right? So PHP is going to take your request, take your web request, parse the users and database, parse the user and password into separate variables, and then format a database query, and then send it to the specific database. Usually you have link hard-coded in some sort of a configuration file, right? And the database is going to return you the data, which then the PHP is going to display on your website. So database is truly on the back end of things. So this might be an example login query that you'll see, right? So essentially, we are saying we want to get data from users. We want to get the entire row, and we want to get rows where username is this and password is this. Now, usually these are, for example, PHP variables I was talking about. And this is an example server code. This is a, this is some sort of a Python code, right? You literally receive the post request. You find the username and the password, put them in a query. Now, this is a bad idea. Don't do this ever in real life, and they'll explain why shortly, but don't just shove them as variables in there. And then I will run the query from the database. So this is a very simple Python, login web server. But okay, I kind of foiled this, but this is a bad idea because because your username and password can form a part of the query, and we're not sanitizing the data. I'll explain what that is shortly. So it puts our username directly into the query. So for example, if my username is a single quote, the database is going to look at this query and see username equal to quote, quote, the variable has ended, and another quote. It will not be able to parse the query correctly, and therefore give us an error, being like, why does this query look like that? And we can potentially do way more dangerous things to modify the query. We can set many, many different things here. In fact, if you just put like some sort of a comment marker, you can directly just cancel out this part of the query and just say where username equal to whatever, and just give you that user without really checking the password. So there are many potential exploits here. Right, so if you look at this query, if we do this, username equal to that, password equal to SIGPwny, that is a commenting SQL. So it's going to turn this query into this. And this modifies how we parse the query because that part is ignored. It is treated as a comment. So now what we get is simply select star from users where username is admin. This is obviously very bad because it's not checking the password. It is straight up just giving you the entry where the username is admin. It bypassed the password checking. So it will always log in as a user admin without needing the password. So there are several injection techniques, right? So previously we're seeing this changing the entire clause and nullifying essentially the second half of the clause. So that's our SQL1 challenge. And of course, if you look at this query, right, this might not be a star. This might be some specific data. And you can do, so essentially in SQL, there's a feature called a union, where if you add a union, it puts two tables together, essentially. So this is for essentially in the database, when you have multiple tables storing different information, and you want to do a cross-table query, right? You would like to do that. But this can also, we can use it to our advantage to exfiltrate additional data from such a faulty query, essentially. So that's our SQL2 challenge. And there's also a type of injection called a blind injection, where the result is not directly passed to client. Again, we'll somewhat cover this in Purple Team, but essentially think about it like this, right? If you give it a normal query, it's gonna say, it's gonna give you like login failed or whatever. But if you manage to make the database crash, it might not show you what the error message is, but it's going to essentially say maybe some sort of unauthorized, maybe just hangs for a bit. So you'll know, okay, maybe the backend is parsing my input kind of weirdly. We don't know what it is, but we know there's a potential SQL injection right there. So this is kind of the idea of blind. This is also something called, I believe, okay, forget about that part. But this is basically what blind is. So there are several blind techniques. For example, because SQL has a lot of features, right? We can make it wait the number of seconds of the first character, for example. And then we can time that and see, okay, it waited, let's say 57 seconds to give me a response, then surely it's the ASCII 57 or something like that. So we can measure what the server is giving us to essentially deduce what the character is. This is also called a side channel, which we'll cover later. So nowadays it's 2025, and this is not really prevalent anymore because websites are never building SQL queries directly. They're usually using some sort of a third-party tool like SQL Alchemy or whatever. So they're not, so usually the website builders are not directly interacting with the database. There's a layer of API in there. That makes the website somewhat safer, right? So this level of API will automatically escape the input. So converting what is potentially instruction into characters and storing them into the database. So sometimes you can remove them. Sometimes you can escape them. So for example, in C, a backward slash, you can use that to escape quotes, for example, right? If you want quotes in a string, you put a backward slash before that, and that's treated as a quote character instead of a string terminator. What's that?
What percent of like what current websites have this like protection? Because it seems really easy to like do. Is it like 9%?
I think a better question is, like, because it's like, okay, I don't have a percentage, first of all, but I think in general, older systems are more vulnerable to this than newer systems. Because probably around 5-10 years ago, people started to just use libraries instead of building raw queries. But before that, people might just be running like raw PHP or like, unlike all the frameworks that we have today, right? Raw PHP, maybe a Java backend, something like that. And people thought to themselves naturally, okay, if I want to query a database, obviously I should just connect to it and query it. So this is where these kind of vulnerabilities happen. So newer systems, people, even if you ask AI nowadays, they're probably just gonna say, use this library, use that library. And in these libraries, they're escaped by default, unless you specifically say, I want to use your library to make a raw query. And usually the library is going to tell you that's an incredibly bad idea. Don't do that. So I think to some extent, the modern libraries mitigated this by essentially just letting people not use the raw things. So to answer your question, I would guess probably if you can find a website that's built in the 90s to the 2000s, the chances are, there's a decent chance. But if you're looking at a website that's built, what, like 5-10 years ago, a slim chance, right? Unless they really hate themselves and want to just code raw SQL queries, um, which doesn't really happen that often nowadays. However, I would like to say that the concept of injection is quite important because at the age of AI, you can potentially inject certain logic into chatbots and make them to do things that they otherwise would not do. Coercion, whatever. We're going to have a dedicated AI meeting on that, but anytime you see an input box, maybe think about how do I manipulate the backend to my advantage, essentially. Legally, of course, disclaimer, but you know. So these are some SQL injection resources. You can use SQLmap. It's an automated SQL injections, right? So essentially what this is going to do, we'll also briefly talk about this in Purple Team, is essentially it will, first of all, try a bunch of potentially vulnerable SQL queries, let's say a single quote, a double quote, and see how the website responds. If it finds an anomaly, then it will go ahead and test different queries to see what version it is, right? Like what kind of vulnerability is it? Am I getting a blind injection? Am I getting like what category of injection am I getting? And then finally, how do I dump the data? How do I get a shell even potentially on some databases that are definitely not from Microsoft? But okay, we'll cover this more about this in Purple Team. But essentially, what this is what SQLmap do. It generates a fair bit amount of traffic, and it kind of defeats the whole purpose of practicing SQL injection. So I do not recommend you guys to use it on Pony CTF, right? Sometimes, if you set the rate to be too fast, it could even consider to be a DOS. So don't do it. Just craft the queries by hand as a practice. But on that note, a segue to Purple Team. If you're attacking essentially simulated real life scenarios, it's a viable tool, especially if you want to move fast. Just not in this case. And in Portswigger, you can get some practice and stuff, right? It's also a segue to Burp Suite, right? They make excellent web tools. I would also like to say that you can find a lot of these cheat sheets, these common queries to test out. It's not just payload of all things. If you simply just Google GitHub, SQL injection, payloads, you'll see many, many people building essentially, 100,000 line queries for you to try each one of them out. Because each query server, MS SQL, MySQL, SQLite, stuff like that, they'll all have their own different quirks and their different set of features, essentially, right? So SQL, the base SQL, the select insert is mostly the same, but each database is going to support their own subset of features that you can potentially use to interact with the system. And yeah, so there are quite a lot of injection resources out there. Feel free to check them out. So now we're going to talk about cross-site scripting, which is also a classic, right? Essentially, this is what happens when a website doesn't sanitize user input on the front end. So we can embed JavaScript on sites that other users execute. So the previous case is we are injecting into the backend, and now we're injecting to the front end. So JavaScript recap. It is a programming language that was used exclusively by websites, but now you can use it to build a front end, back end, and many other things that I shall not name because I despise JavaScript. But anyway, so it runs in the browser. You can simply open the developer console as previously demonstrated and type in JavaScript commands or queries to run in there. For example, console log. For example, a bunch of other things like alerts and whatever, right? And JavaScript can essentially interact with the browser to store cookies and stuff to log in again. We have a same origin policy because it would be really bad if you're visiting one website and this website's JavaScript can read another website's cookie. So JavaScript can only read and store info from the same domain. The browser internally keep track of that, right? Let's say you access a malicious site and they automatically have your banking cookies, which potentially can include a session cookie. That means the attacker can simply get the cookie, set it to their browser, and log in as you. It will be really bad. So the browser designer essentially thought about that and be like, okay, each website needs to have their own, needs to only be able to access their own cookies. Now, the attacker solution to this is get arbitrary JavaScript to be stored on target website so the user executes it. Now, what does that mean? Let's say we have a simple message app that if you go to /view, the message is going to be rendered. Okay, this is to allow users to share notes, to share their daily life. It's like a dumbed-down version of Instagram, almost, not really. So let's say this is the link, right? And the message is placed directly in HTML. The link can render normal text. It's just in the paragraph. But also, since we're not escaping it, the link will also just directly be interpreted as HTML text. And in this case, there's a tag that JavaScript can let the browser interpret the content as JavaScript, called script. So if you place script in there, it's going to look at here and be like, okay, this is a script block. This is a JavaScript. I will execute the JavaScript in there, which executes this. Now, remember previously, our intention is simply to let users share their notes, not to execute anything. And now we've essentially achieved by asking user to visit a link, we can execute arbitrary JavaScript on their computer, which is not good. So there are many, many different XSS techniques. For example, the classic script one, right? And some web developers might thought to themselves, okay, script is bad. Let's just ban script. Let's just let you not be able to have script. Well, that doesn't really work because there are other things that support running JavaScript. For example, when you have an image tag, you can set an unload tag. That simply means when the image is loaded, do whatever. This is also a perfectly valid way to execute JavaScript. Also on error, right? I can simply set the source to something that doesn't exist, and on error, it's going to execute my JavaScript. And so the meeting flag, is a form of SVG XXS. So basically, it's the same idea as an image, where if you load an SVG, it's going to execute the JavaScript. And since this is another classic one, it's pretty much well documented. You can go to Hacktricks or simply Google, XSS payload to see a lot of the attack types and stuff. And after you get XSS, you can run any JavaScript you want on a visitor's browser. Steal cookies, monitor keystrokes, whatever. You can even change the page content to potentially get users to click on whatever. So imagine, does any of you guys know what an iframe is? So an iframe is simply like a frame, it's embedded in a site to allow you to display other websites, right? So imagine you have XSS and you just display an iframe over the original site to display a completely different website. So there are many, many things you can do. I mean, ultimately, if you get XSS, then this web page's content is at your disposal. So it is not a good thing to do. So imagine if Google Docs is an SSS, right? I can just send you a maliciously crafted Google Docs, and I can potentially get your Google session cookie and log in as you. So not great. So go try yourselves. We have some SQL injection challenges. We have some XSS challenges. Cameron, are they up?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're up. So feel free to go to the website and check them out. So again, I would like to reiterate, we have CSOL CTF quals tomorrow at 7. So feel free to join us and check out the challenges together. This Sunday, I believe Michael and Suchet will be presenting OSINT, open source intelligence, which is about gathering information about targets online. And then next Thursday, we're going to talk about reverse engineering setup, install tools that you guys will use if you want to do this line of work. Again, this is the meeting flag, and thank you guys for listening.
Your computer.
Oh yeah, close that off. Do you want to do a duplicate, like a duplication, instead of an extension? Okay. Screen sharing has been stopped. Okay, that's fine. I'll just share the screen and drag this to the bottom. You want to use my account? Okay, I have it logged in. I have it logged in. So just do whatever you want. You want to know?
But like, say someone's like, oh,
All right, I'm gonna demo one of the challenges. So just I guess I'll probably do two of them. So raise your hand if you have a Pony CTF account. Should be all of you. Yeah, there's no reason not to. So right now go to ctf.sigpwny.com and make an account. Half of the content we do is these challenges for you. They're probably the best way to actually learn the content in the slides. So make an account and attempt all the challenges we pull from the vault into meetings at the very least. So how many of you have already solved this one in this room? So it's 26 total, but all right, most of you haven't. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes. Take a look at this one specifically if you haven't started. SQL injection 1. Yeah.
And I get personal assistance.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll give you 5 minutes to try this challenge, and then I'm going to show the solution.
It's okay. I just tell them we'll go after.
But injection. Right, but this specific. Big deal about. Slowly weighing down.
I got it.
So.
Wait, it's not really relevant.
But you're saying it's like Microsoft. I'm gonna keep this.
But I think they do this one and yeah, repeat on the second. Yeah. I mean, I can check who brought it up, but.
I mean, let's work now. We can just do git play.
Well, I mean, authors are usually,
But it's not.
yeah, the author.
Yeah.
Is there a way to delay it or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, how long so? If this
I'd like-
is a mistake.
So, yeah.
LLMs on the other hand, alongside later, so, that's the thing, that's really cool, rich. So, these no exactly which would be. I didn't realize it's like, I assumed that. I assume that's to that. Yeah, actually, girls. That's not. If you visit. Okay. You did need it. They can translate it.
That doesn't have, yeah, Apple, it's like,
Yeah, you have like, even your message. Wait, no. It's gonna be also, I like, slower than in community. Sure. Also, too. You do that.
Doesn't really be.
I'm down there. I walk over. I'm coming out to see. They're down there. Oh, yeah. That's right. They were. I tried to it worked. And I like really get to the point of the guy. I'll tell my food out there. I go to that, there was a lot of people there. Not here. It should not work for civil engineering companies. I was like, what's that? He's like, yeah, I heard of that. He's like, I have a little credit on. I was like, God dang, I don't like 20 minutes.
All right, I'm gonna go over the solve for this one, equal injection one. How many of you solved it now? At the start it was less. All right, still a lot of people haven't solved it. So there are harder ones if you're scared that I'm showing suspicion, but.
He's like, oh, like the security guy for a
All right. So we see this, there's a username and password that wants to be entered. So let me just try something like hello. And then the password, I'm gonna put password. And then I have to solve a CAPTCHA. No ChatGPT allowed. All right, so that was wrong. So my random guess for username and password was not right. So let's read the challenge. It's kind of the general steps you should take when solving any CTF challenge. So they told me the username. And then they gave me the query. And I'm gonna open these hints for all of our CTF. Whenever there's a hint, the cost is 0 points. And usually I recommend just opening them right away, even if you don't need help, because sometimes they're just extra context. So let's see these ones. So yeah, that's a good question. What can we put for username and password to make it log in as the admin? So let's take a look at this query. I'm just gonna copy the entire thing into Notepad. And I get to manipulate these two parts, this username and this password. So I know the username. So what if I just put in the username for username, but I don't know the password? So I get this. And where in the slides did we say that if you had the username and not the password, there was a little trick you could do to skip the password part? Can anyone remember what that was? No, I'm just gonna show you. Yeah, it's you put a single quote and then a double dash to make a comment. And then everything followed by the comment just gets ignored. So the query looks like this. And what's happening on the back end in PHP is it's looking if this query returns any results. So before, when we had the password, if you put in the wrong password, then the query would return no results because there's no user with this username and then the wrong password. But with our new query, oh, oops, I forgot Notepad can't go backwards. So with our new query like this, we know that there is actually a user called FA2025 because they told us. So this query would return a result and would let us log in. So let's try it. Mprez.
It's Mr.
Is it Mr.? Mr. And then I'm gonna leave password blank because we said it doesn't matter. And let me log in. Wrong one. Oh no. Okay, I have to redo it. Click the wrong link. And I have to solve the captcha again. Let's try the second one. And there's the flag. So yeah, I'm gonna close it so no one can steal that. Now you have to solve it yourself. But yeah, that's SQL injection one. Yes?
I have a question. So like in the query, there's like a parenthesis like before this, and then at the end there's like a semicolon and like the parentheses. But like
Oh, this
when
this
you like comment on the rest of it, wouldn't it also comment out semicolon the end quote?
no, because the way this is actually being like everything inside of this is a string. So I could put like anything in here is still treated by a string in PHP. So like for one, PHP comment is actually not dash dash, that's just in SQL. So even if it was interpreted that way, it still wouldn't actually be treated as a comment by PHP. But anyways, like in terms of PHP, PHP doesn't actually care what's in these quotes. Like it could be anything. It's going to still just treat it as a string, so it won't escape the actual like code part of the PHP.
So like basically anything outside of like the double quotes, what doesn't really matter. We don't care about.
Yeah, you just care about what's in the double quotes, because that's the SQL part.
There are some funny injections in PHP though. Go check out, is that like a calculator? I don't remember what the name is. Is that
Yeah.
PHP calc or something? Yeah, PHP also has some funky injections. There's a calculator challenge on that.
Yeah. Alright, so now that you've seen SQL injection 1, this is a suite. There's a SQL injection 2, slightly harder version. So actually significantly harder version, but so you can try that out next. And in a few minutes, I'll show off XSS1. So yeah, keep trying. And if you don't want to see a solution to this one, you might want to solve it now too. So you could take a look at XSS1 if you want to be able to solve it on your own. 640.
Yeah. You see it for a while, and that's all I said. Put it on that, but it shows the way forward. No, because you know, there's a copilot, right? Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, this actually is one of because now I'm trying to check the notepad as a child. Two notepads. I mean, I was just playing this last night. Oh, my friend doesn't check the notepad. And I saw notepad's job across the notepad because top notepad, notepad, but bottom notepad is a notepad. And then I just wrote show stuff. Like really. No, no, she's weird. It says two constants. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the child process that runs like I got his estimate. I mean, I can't believe it. The best is we were playing around with our domain. And I guess okay, look, button, you know, the old like 2000s era MS SQL database. Man, it looks amazing. It's so curved right through the screen.
But I don't think I do. I can pull it up.
Yeah, we just logged in. That's the big thing. Yeah, I'm it's already born will have a very true box.
That's pretty.
My, I'm whether it's valid, you know.
Well, no one uses Windows or yeah, Windows size.
It's like, that when you start doing a little bit.
I was going to discuss for acting collapse, like,
Oh, yeah.
and people think that it's really is that this is a liar by. Yeah, I mean, you can always just like top tier state blockchain hacks and drugs development, right? That's initially the sort of thing that's like, okay, that are but that's usually certain. Yes.
What?
And if you compromise that, then you just.
How will that straight out? That you clear out the way.
What is the 4055?
Try 62070. That might not be it. You're expecting.
2736. I think had it saved.
Or one more.
Yeah, I mean, my whole resume is. Oh, it's like,
Like an impression.
All the people here are from.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, yeah. It's something that in their setup, but I don't want to.
How do we need to hide about? We didn't do over.
Every fucking person I've ever seen. We can even buy them enterprise like. We can get them enterprise. We can buy. Like. Study rates are.
Yes, they're
Just call that.
Yeah, that's like. We pay for it.
That's why we like it.
That's. Yeah, not only, you know.
Alright. Is it on?
Oh, let's go for it.
I think.
Beautiful.
Oh, and the
Islands. It's not connected to database right now, but it's fantastic.
So bad.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm gonna show the solve for XSS1.
It's also.
So let's go to the challenge. Ignore the complaint. Alright, so we have a text box. Like any CTF challenge, I'm gonna type in something random and then hit buttons until it works. Okay, I see 2 buttons. I can view my submission. And that is what I typed, so that's working. And I can make the president view my submission, and apparently that didn't work. So hello is not enough. So let's read the hint, because we need help. Okay, this is the goal, to make it alert 1, which checks out. Because on the page earlier, it said the president didn't see my alert. So I want to run the JavaScript function alert and then something in it. The standard for XSS is to just do 1, because that's the shortest thing you could possibly put in an alert. A string would require 2 quotes, so the number 1 is like the shortest thing you can put. So that's why you'll see it recommends doing alert 1. But for this challenge, you could alert anything. So let's go back and try something else. It says the challenge is called XSS1, so the solution probably involves XSS. And the common way you test for XSS is what we showed in the slides where you do these bold tags. Slash, I know HTML. So if you don't know HTML, the B, actually, I don't even know if this will work, but let's try I maybe. Yeah, I is for italics. And as we can see, even though I submitted like the literal text had like the brackets and the slashes and the I in it. In my output, there's none of that. All I see is the word hello, and for some reason it's in italics. So it's not treating my input like a string, it's treating it like an actual piece of HTML, which is rendering to the screen. Which, if you see that, that's the necessary condition for XSS. So we know that this site is XSS vulnerable, which makes sense. The challenge name is called XSS1. All right. So what did we learn about how to do XSS? We want to run JavaScript. So let's try running JavaScript. I'm typing with one hand. So as we said in the slides, the stuff in between the script tags gets treated by the browser as JavaScript. And JavaScript lets you do these like single line statements like this. You don't even need a semicolon, it will add it in for you. And this just is called the alert function with the value 1. So let's view my submission. And I did get an alert pop-up. This is what the alert pop-up looks like. And it alerted the number 1. So I'm pretty sure if I submitted this to the president, it'll work, and it did. It gave me the flag. So that's the solve. If you're confused, kind of like in this example, it's like, why are you alerting? What is this doing? Why is this actually important as a vulnerability? And XSS is probably one of the most important web vulnerabilities, because once you get it, you can make your client do all sorts of stuff. Like the famous example from a long time ago is on MySpace. Someone got XSS on MySpace and they were able to make like a bug that spread throughout the internet because whenever you went to their profile, it would take the code that they wrote, the XSS payload, and publish it to their own profile. So like you start with one person, and then everyone who sees it, now it's on their profile, and everyone who sees that, it's on their profile, and it's spread through the whole site and got that guy in prison for a long time.
Didn't someone also like pet Twitter do that?
Yeah, someone did it on Twitter too, where they made a bot that the moment you viewed their tweet, it would like the post automatically without you doing anything. So you just look at the tweet and then it likes it. So, or you could have it automatically follow you. Like once you get XSS, you can make the client basically do whatever you want. Only on TweetDeck? Oh yeah, that's boring. But you can imagine, I think
You can do worse things, I presume.
you can do worse things.
No, but.
Yeah. So even though I'm showing you like what I showed you today is kind of a technique to find XSS in any website, please don't go writing into random websites. Like don't just start putting bold tags everywhere on every website you see. Like it probably won't work because someone's probably tried that before you. And even if it did work, you don't want it to work because you'll get in trouble. Yeah. But on our site on PwnyCTF, you can do that for any of them. Most of the time it won't work exactly how you want it to, or at least the payload will be a little more complicated than just script tags. So that's why there are multiple XSS challenges. So yeah, try out XSS 2, and then you'll see a more complicated one. All right, thank you. Meeting.